what I failed to do that I see now is you can't run from the person in the mirror. And so when I moved out here, just like transitioning from high school to college, found the same old me's.
Every single individual has a story to tell, and they're great stories that need to be heard.
I want every listener to know they have the ability to change the world.
Welcome to the 1720 podcast.
What's up, Mountain Movers? Welcome back to the 1720 podcast. How cool was it to have Holly back after 3-ish years? I think you broke down the exact day in the description.
I did. I went and did the Google Math calendar translator thing because I was actually curious because we sort of kicked around. Was it 2 years? Was it 3 years? And you go back and look, and it was, man, that was an early episode and a transformational episode, I think, for us. But I did, what was it, 1029, I think, something like that was the exact amount of days.
Well, I knew it was making you itch that I was saying approximately 3 years.
Yeah.
You're like, we're not approximating anything.
Yeah. This is figure outable. We will figure it out. Yes. Yeah. You know, I was, after we recorded with her, I did go back and listen to most of the episode, the original one. And it was transformational because it was a new day sort of dawning, if you will, for us on the podcast and sort of the stories we're telling and the messaging that we were putting out there. Not our stories, but of others. And I don't know if I've ever told you this or not, but it was transformational for you too. Have we had this conversation?
No.
Because up until that date, let me say it differently. Me on the podcast has just been me. Like, this is just me. I've probably people listen and say I've changed some, or my approach to it has changed some or something. But for the most part, like, this is me. There was a moment, like a marked moment in there where you changed from, hey, this is Kevin, to like on the fly, like this, we're doing this. Do you know I know the exact moment. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think when it just got real in the room.
Yes. It was the moment where we were talking, and I guess you could just sense like I was not going to be able to make a really good transition from where we were to the next moment in time. I couldn't figure it out. And you figured it out. I forget exactly the question you asked, but you laid out like the perfect question to her that like folded us into the next part of that episode. And I remember when it happened thinking, it's all new now. Like that's a new Kevin in terms of our podcast journey. And it happened right there in that episode. I don't know if you and I have ever talked about that or not, but if you go back and listen to it now, you'd be like, that was it. That was the question that started that, like the getting us away from hello, this is Kevin into this version of like shucking and jiving Kevin.
So brutal. Those openers, like as soon, like I just want to throw my phone out the window when you go back to any one of those where we had that opener, but we didn't know any better, man. We were trying to get it going, but like you would bail me out all the time. And only thing I remember about that one is like, you're like, dude, I didn't know what to say next. And you jumped in and it was like the first role reversal, but that was before we had the cues on when you're dried up or I'm dried up. Like now we have them.
Well,
we know exactly when each other are dried up and we got to jump in.
But that's funny.
It doesn't really happen anymore.
No. I think I know what yours are. What are mine? How can you tell when I'm about to like just run out of stuff? Man, is that my verbal tick that I've
it's a whisper. Man. And I'm like, okay, jump in, Kev. You better have something.
I could tell yours because you're feverishly taking notes normally. Like writing things down is, I think, oftentimes like the Kevin's not jumping back in here. Like either you've like your brain has gone somewhere else, or you're like locked into that, or I don't know, maybe it's a cover too. It might be your version of man. But I look over and you're writing. I'm like, okay, grab the paddle.
Okay, so maybe I got multiple ones because I thought maybe I look up at you with lost puppy eyes, like.
Oh, sometimes,
if I'm staring at you, that means I got nothing, dude.
Well, obviously this is audio, but the face you just made was, I've seen that face before. I knew that.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the parts of, I think we pivot off of Holly's episode because there's a couple of really interesting points in there that brings us to something we're going to talk about today. The thing that jumped out at me from her second recording was the permission part of that. Like having permission to have the conversations and such. but then you said something. You said something in there, and you didn't make that face at me, but you made a face at me. That was about how, when we first started this journey, you didn't know if I even knew all of your story, and my mind started racing because I knew parts of it, right? I knew parts of it. Eventually, before it got written in the book, I knew all of it. I don't remember when that all happened, and I don't remember if like at that date on that time I knew all of it for sure. But it was a spot where I was like, okay, if you haven't grabbed the book, if you haven't read through the opener of that, or if you've sort of missed some of us talking about it on the podcast, right? Because we haven't done it sort of in long form. It only lives in print. Maybe this is our opportunity to give that permission here and just say, man, talk us through, because there's a point in there, man, and it builds to a poignant moment. But let's tell that story, Kev, if you're willing to do it, man.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that transition over the past year has went from not a soul to I'll tell everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Because and it's same but different, right? Holly's, wasn't a self-sabotage type thing. Hers was outside of her control and something that she was forced grit and resilience with, and she still finds healing through sharing that testimony. And so do I with sharing mine. But the other thing I get out of it is accountability. Like there's really no accountability misses with hers, right? Like, it's not the same. And so I like sharing this because it sort of has to do with our industry, and it definitely has to do with the purpose solar system. So the sun of my solar system, and where I had that wrong. And with the industry, I love construction. It's done so much for me. I'm so happy and proud to be a part of it, but I fell backwards into it. It was when I was a kid, I didn't say construction's going to be it. Like this is my gold standard. This is the everything. It's no, you made some life choices, and all of a sudden that spectrum gets smaller and smaller of the things you can do. And it was just clawing and scratching to get a job. And going back to construction was just my natural tendency because of my come up. And part of my come up is coming from south side of Chicago. Parents did an awesome job of continuing to move us further away from Chicago, out into the suburbs, and probably got us in places where we absolutely could not afford, but they somehow, some way made it happen. And my mom was a bus driver and my dad was a union caulker. And so that makes some sense on how I got into the glass business. But construction's always been in my bones. But there was a lot of things that I wrestled with in my childhood into my early adulthood where, man, I was slinging dope before I even had a driver's license. And so there was a little retail shop, a small food shop, and I would sell sandwiches out the front and other things out the back. And, we're talking about an age where I would have to get picked up for my shift from work and have stuff on me or leave stuff there. And, I would say the sun of my solar system at that time was money, right? Like I was willing to cross moral, ethical, any boundaries to get it. And when I really reflect on it, I think another close son to that was approval and respect.
Right.
I feel like Chicago's a big respect thing and, a tough guy thing. And you're chasing respect from the wrong people. And that's where I found myself in my early teenage years.
There's a catalyst that you don't just wake up and start doing that. Like not the catalyst is not the right word, but there's a moment in time where you're like, okay, I'm going to cross this bright red line. Do you remember that moment?
Man, I don't. I remember like trying cigarettes and we're like at a young age and like how big of a deal that was.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's part of the answer. Like we were so scared to get caught that there was a sod farm near our house and we would bury my friend's dad's Winston cigarettes in a hole and we would go undig it and smoke and then dig it back to get back in. And maybe those were those reps, and I'm talking 10 years old. So fifth grade, that's when that started, and building those reps. And I think it just started growing from there, from cigarettes and went alcohol, from alcohol went weed, from weed it went to harder things. And there was just a natural progression. Like you talk about routines and habits and all those things that we talk about, that I was building those habits. So then when I had those moments of decision in the crosshairs, it was getting easier and easier for me to pick the wrong direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like that with positive things and with negative things, right?
Totally.
It's easier to get up and go to the gym in the morning when you've gone 150 days in a row, just as it is. And I'll over exaggerate the other direction, but I would imagine for like soldiers, it's easier to shoot the 100th bad guy than it was to shoot the first one, you know?
Yeah. And you see these things in early high school, and, you know, God bless my parents for dealing with all my nonsense. But there was a time where I was either going to the military or the union trades. Like the future was already laid out for me. And my mom kind of gave me an ultimatum on college, and I won't share more of that story. But basically, I looked at my buddy Jake in English class one day because of this ultimatum, and I just slapped him on the shoulder. I'm like, "Hey, where are you going to school, dude?" And he said, "Illinois State." And I'm like, "Cool." And then I got an application. I filled out to that school, application to that school, and I was like, "All right, I've done my minimum. You know, here it is. You know, low ECT score, subpar GPA, all that sort of stuff. If I get in, I'll go." And I thought the chances were next to nothing. And I got into school, and I was like, "Wow, all right, well, I got to live up to my end of the bargain." And I went and ended up going to college. And I will say, because of all the things I was living, like college was just another day, which I actually think helped me get through college a little bit, because it didn't rock my foundation of the party lifestyle, because I've been doing it. I was primed and ready.
I shouldn't laugh at that, but yeah, right. Like, it's, again, I've already had those reps. It's cool. It was no big deal.
Yeah. But what happens, and you're going to see this continued progression, is I go to school, but I bring some old habits behind me. Mm-hmm. So like, I got this next phase of life. Holy cow. I got into a college, but very quickly, with a whole new spectrum of people that I don't know, I end up finding the bad. I don't want to call them out, but like finding the people that I look like, right? You know, I just naturally gravitate towards. And so I'm bouncing at bars. I'm starting to sell drugs again, but now at college, and, you know, you're living that broke college life. And so now I'm balancing those together. And again, money is the sun, and respect and friendships. And you get all that when you're doing those types of things. So although I made that transition to college, those old habits stayed with me and actually even got worse.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how, I don't want to say it's like the haunting of your past, right? But I guess to some extent it is that the habits follow you. It doesn't. I think you have said this before. Like, your friends change, your locations change, but the stuff, the baggage, it comes with you unless you make a willing, difficult decision to break from it, leave it behind, or whatever. Because it all tends to follow you. Right? It's not the people, it's not the place, it's not the location, it's not the thing. The hard thing to say is, it's you, homie. Like, it's you.
Oh yeah.
You know?
And that took a few more phases until I finally figured that out. You fast forward through college, I got in and out at 4 years. You know, I kept my grades up and got out. And when I got out, that was the end of my entrepreneurial career. We'll just call it that. But when you sell drugs for that long, if you partake in them as well, you can build up a pretty mighty tolerance. You know, number one, probably because it's just built within me. Number two, because it's free. You know, they say don't get high on your supply, but I was. And now I graduate college and I go into a professional career. Yes, I'm leaving the dealing behind and all that sort of stuff, but the habit's still there.
Yeah.
And now I'm making real money, legal money,
right.
You know, career money. And it's okay. It's grind time. And so Monday through Friday, we're going to grind it out. And then my weekends, I was still doing the same old thing.
Yeah. The grind during the week sort of giving rise to the habits on the weekend, or whatever the relief, I don't know what the right word is there. And how many, you feel like that's a common refrain, right? It's like, man, I'm going to work during the week, but the weekends are mine. I'm going to do whatever I want, no matter what that means.
Yeah. And when I really reflect on it, the sun of the solar system, when I transitioned from college to my career, the sun changes from money to work. Mm. So now, okay, career time. I'm going to stay at this building, even if I have nothing else to do. So I could set the alarm just in case the the president's looking at the alarm codes to see who's setting the alarm. Like it's effort, it's tenacity, it's hustle. I'm going to go grind, but it's all about me still. Like I want the promotions, the raises, the glory, whatever the case may be. So if I'm doing those things and that's the sun of my solar system and there's success there, I have no drive or reason to fix the weekends. Like it's justified. And it doesn't matter. I'm killing it. Monday through Friday, I'm killing it. Right. So there's nothing to fix.
Maybe, I don't know what the other word is, but maybe even more than justified, right? Like it's building it. It's there's a bigger word there. I'm remiss to grab it, but like it's evidence that the weekend is deserved. Like, because I'm killing it over there. Like I get to do this now because look at what I did over there. It's an entitlement, perhaps, even to have those weekends like that.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I mean, you've seen the statistics. We're in an industry that, we're looking like 15 years ago. That's part of the story. Like, it wasn't taboo doing the things I was doing, especially in Chicago.
Yeah,
like,
right.
There was plenty of people within the industry and organization that was doing the same, so it wasn't like I was this lone wolf. So it was hard to even see it recognized as a problem.
Right. So then you're still, I got the timeline a little jumbled in my head, but you pinpointed us there for a second, like still in Chicago. You hadn't made the trek down to the motherland yet.
No. And that ends up happening in 2010. And when I get offered an opportunity to move out here, man, I really, in my heart of hearts, but I didn't know what was actually stirring because I was unsaved in 2010. So I get that opportunity, and in my heart of hearts, I'm like, man, I think I need to get away from everybody. Like I think I need a reset.
Mm-hmm.
And I was single, no kids at the time. I'd never even been to Dallas Fort Worth, got this opportunity, and I just said yes. My personality profile. you'd have analyzed it for 6 months. I think I took 6 seconds. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And
yeah,
I'm sure it's an awesome city. And
I'm sure it's great. I'll figure it out when I get there.
Yeah. Well, and I pictured hats and hay bales and all that sort of stuff. You get out here. This is like Dallas is a smaller Chicago.
Yeah, it's metropolitan. There's really,
you got to go to the stockyards for what I was envisioning.
Yeah. Right. Right. So this is 10. You said 2010.
Yeah, 2010. And what I failed to do that I see now is you can't run from the person in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I moved out here, just like transitioning from high school to college, found the same old me's. Yeah. And again, reactivated my Monday through Friday lifestyle, Friday through Sunday. And that show just kept going and going and going and going. And we're talking week in, week out. And between 2010 and 2014, I was saved in 2012. So, came to know Christ and gave my life to him. 2012 to 2014, I would call like the honeymoon period, mm-hmm. where you get on fire, you want to change, and then that kind of fades off, like our New Year's resolutions and good habits. And, I ended up sliding into an even deeper valley, one of the deepest valleys of my life by 2014, just because I wasn't working on the man in the mirror enough.
Yeah. So let's hold that for just a minute and look back, because when you leave from Chicago and head to Dallas, like the thought is, I don't know exactly how you phrase it, but the thought is like, I'm going to leave that guy behind. This is a fresh start.
Yep.
And I think now, and you may have said this, that was not true. You can't run from that dude. But if you had a do-over, right? Like let's rewind it to 2010 and you're 2010 Kev and you're headed to Dallas to get that life reset. Like this is it. Like what advice would you give somebody who's staring down that decision to actually create the hard reset that you thought you had but didn't? Like
talk to somebody about it.
Yeah.
Because it was all up here in my head. Like I knew what I was leaving, but who could I talk to about where I was going to hang out with better people? Like I would have had to have a level of openness out here and be like, here's who I was and who I am, and here's who I would like to be. But I was surrounded by nobody out here.
Yeah.
And so I had to go find people. And since I didn't have like a structure or set parameters, it was, well, I don't know anybody out here. So after the Monday through Friday, where am I going to go meet people? Well, how about the bar across the street from my apartment?
Yeah, right.
And same old story.
Yeah, same old story. That's among other great advice that I think we've kicked around or people have told us over the last few years on the podcast. Like, find someone to talk to about it is great advice. Just period, in a vacuum, find somebody to talk to about it. But especially in those, like, man, I'm about to do something really hard. I'm about to have a hard reset here. Got to find somebody to talk to. You got to find somebody to say, look, man, actually, if that's what you're trying to do, don't go across the street to the bar. That's a bad spot to go. Don't go over there. Come with me, man. We're going to go to the football game. Come with me. We're going to go to service on Sunday. Like, whatever. You got to seek out either professional or like groups of people who are going to send you in the right direction. Find your tribe, right?
Super important. And what I realized is not only can you not run away from your issues, like if work is your son and you're solely focused on that, probably some success and some promotions and more money's coming, more money, more problems, right? Like I had more money to play with, which even deepened the addictions I was in, the darkness I was in, and started spinning me deeper into that valley, which got pretty scary.
Yeah, this is the part of the story where I knew you by now. And when you tell the balance of this, it's your story. And as you say, I'm not telling a story. I tell a story. I stole that from me last week. But man, as you tell this part of the story, that burns because I knew you when this was going on. And you didn't have any idea. I didn't have any idea. And we'll tell through it, and then we could talk about like just leaning in those moments and whatnot. But my bad, dude. Like I know you say like it's no big deal, but like how can you call yourself a friend if you let this happen and didn't even know it was underneath your nose? So
man, we're recording this on Halloween Day, and it just makes me think of masks. I just had a pretty doggone good mask on.
Yeah.
You know, I have it all together Monday through Friday,
right?
You know, until I didn't. And that's what led us to March of 2014, where it was another standard week of Monday through Friday, killing it at work. And then Friday through Sunday, it was time to binge. And so it was the typical partying and hard drugs. And Saturday night, you know, people were at my place and then they left, and I was really high and really alone. And man, I for the first time, I had like a full blown panic attack, like just an uppercut of like, this is your life. This is your present. This is your future. You're going nowhere. You're empty. No one's here. You got no family. Like all of this is building up. And, you know, things like cocaine they mess with your brain a little bit where you're not thinking rationally. And so when I was as high as I was, to the point where I couldn't even speak out loud, right? Like I could only like text or type. I started thinking about ending my life, and I had a handgun, and I was looking at it, and I call it the fork in the road. Like I had a decision to make there. And earlier that weekend, I was hanging out with another buddy that moved here from Dallas, and we were watching the Bulls. And after the Bulls, I went off and continued to party. He went home, and just something in my spirit just told me, just message Jeff. And so instead of pulling the trigger, I messaged Jeff and told him, man, this is the first time I'm, you know, telling somebody like, hey, man, I got a problem. And I need some help. Would you be able to help me out? And he jumped straight into action, man. Like I had flights and a spot booked within hours.
Yeah.
So,
he answered
the call.
Say more about Jeff, because I don't know Jeff personally. I've now heard this story a few times, but I heard something when you told it just then that jumped out at me. Was that he was new to Dallas also? Was it someone you knew from home?
Yeah. Like okay. What's crazy is, so like, I don't know if you've ever had this happen. Like we were like acquaintance level in college, like a friend of a friend type thing. And we'd see each other partying and stuff. And then he notifies me like, hey, I'm moving to Dallas. And instantly we become closer because now we're doing this together, if that makes sense.
100%.
And so we became really close friends, stood up in each other's weddings level, you know?
Yeah.
But it was that I'm moving to where you live. Therefore, we are now instantly good friends. And, you know, I'm going to keep him anonymous for career reasons for him without sharing his last name. But he went through some deep stuff prior to this that I was able to help him walk through. And so, like, we were able to be there for each other through some really tough times. And, he stepped up, and what you know now, and I didn't know until we started writing the book and asking him permission to put this story in the book, was that there was a season before me reaching out to him where he had another friend reach out and he didn't do anything, and that friend ended up passing away.
Mm-hmm.
And so the moment I reached out to this dude, Jeff, this was his chance at redemption. This was his chance at helping another brother. He wasn't going to let another brother down. And I even put a snapshot of his text reply into the book as a caption to show, what the profound God moment and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is the intersection of a bunch of profound moments and the opportunity for folks to just linger. And I think I may have said it as I was working through the comments in the book, right? In the reflections, is just like, you never know when whatever that conversation you're having is actually a call for help. You never know when you're Jeff.
Yeah.
And when you need and when that comes at you and an opportunity to like step into action and do something huge, so just like be alert to that. Be Jeff in that situation, be Jeff, be ready to help, be ready to drop what you're doing and help. Because it literally is life or death,
Yeah, it is. And we joke. We're big time Southside Chicago jokesters too. So like, he knew that this was different.
Yeah.
This night, because it wasn't. I don't even think it was the middle of the night, because it was far into the next day. So, but yeah, forever thankful for him, and we'll always have that bond together. But I wanted the rules of engagement. I wanted a rehab facility outside of Texas, outside of Illinois, mountain of shame, right? So I'm already dealing with addiction, and the shame and guilt is building. And if I'm going to work on me, I don't want anybody knowing about it. So we settled on California, and the very next day had a flight booked, one-way flight, which is a scary thing in itself.
Yeah.
And just flew out to California and stayed in a hotel. And then the following day got picked up by the facility, and I was in rehab for 3 weeks.
And just off the grid, right? Like off the grid from work, off the grid from friends, off the grid from people in Dallas, off the grid from your parents even, right?
Yeah, no phone, no connection to the outside world at all. And my parents ended up, I actually don't even remember. They found out somehow, because one day one of the rehab facilitators pulled me aside, said, "Hey, your mom or your dad's on the phone." And, obvious concern with them, and was just able to tell them, "I got this."
Yeah.
Southside Chicago. It's just a thing. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Don't worry about it.
Right. One of the things about this story and I don't know if everybody kind of appreciates this, but we've had these conversations before about how people who have addictions, like in my stupid, feeble, ignorant mind, think, "Oh, it's over. You beat it. You did it, right? Like it's over." And you said, we were in the studio one day, and I remember I was like curling the cords up as we had finished recording. I was like, looping them back together. And you said something like, "Yeah, it never goes away." And it floored me.
Yeah.
To think that like the struggle, the war wages on, right? The war rages on either way. It floored me. Because I never had that thought. That's never crossed my mind that, I guess you could like liken it to like a can of Coke. Like if you love a can of Coke, you never forget like what that sound is like when you pop the top of the smell of the fizz coming out. You never forget it. And you always want to like, man, what's another, we're just a red can of Coca-Cola. That'd be amazing right now. You never forget. And I never thought about it like that.
It's pretty difficult when, it's just, you're just one wrong decision away.
Yeah.
When that wrong decision can tailspin you, and I thought I was stronger than it, right? Than the addiction. And so there was several times I tried to reintroduce drinking into my life. And really that's the gateway, because once I have a few cocktails, like all reason, risk, at what cost, out the door.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It does not matter. Family doesn't matter. And that's what people in recovery or that have faced addiction, they understand it and we can commiserate together. But when you're outside looking in, you're like, how could you do that? Like you have your family on the line. because it's broken in us, And so learning that, and so I guess I should say, after the 3 weeks, came back, got back online. The Stewarts of the world, my friends were like, "Where have you been?" I'm like, busy working. I didn't tell a soul that when I came back, not one person, and just tried to ease back into this, but now not drink. And that got so weird that I started drinking again, which then increased the temptation. But man, so that was 2014, and I went, what is it now? 2022 is when I started letting the cat out of the bag. So there was a good 8 years that I held on to all those mountains of shame and having to fight this alone, and the awkwardness of trying not to drink at events and explain it away. That has thankfully gotten a lot more mainstream nowadays, but like that was taboo in construction, not drinking, to my earlier point, like I could find somebody to hang out with and party with in this industry, no problem.
Yeah.
Which made things more difficult than they had to be, because I was trying to hide it. I was trying to hide my flaws. I was trying to hide the mountains and not seeing them for what they were.
Yeah. It is becoming increasingly easier to not have a drink in your hand or whatever, but it is still, show up at a Christmas party, there is a certain commiserate amount of peer pressure around all that stuff, that one thing leads to another. I suppose if that's the way your brain has been rewired, it's everywhere. And it's I sort of like, as best as I can empathize with it, I'm kind of a neat freak. Does this shock you to know this? And whenever things are out of order, and I think it probably, to me, sounds more in like being a control freak than a neat freak. But when things are out of order, it feels like people are just screaming at me in my brains. Like it's like it's an unavoidable like distraction that I can't get rid of, and I can only assume it's something like that. Like it's everywhere at those events, everywhere. It's like screaming at you everywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's Atomic Habits, where it says like you don't have to make a million right decisions in a row and constantly be on. It's the timing of the right decision.
Yeah.
And so it's like a pre-decision, a mindset thing. We've been talking a lot about that lately. Like, and yes, of course, I know you're a clean freak. We started or an organization freak. We started this podcast in your garage, and I looked around. I'm like, this does not look like my garage. It was, pretty spotless.
Yeah. The Barry said, remember we had Barry Brooks on? He said something about the decision only matters at the time you make it, or something to this effect. He was talking about that, how he would have to drive home, and there was a spot during the drive home where he would turn left or turn right, and he'd turn right to go to the gym, or turn left and go home. And he could think all day long about going to the gym, but the only time the decision mattered was right there at the Y in the road. And that's the point. It's just like you have to decide all day long. That's the point where I'm going to make this decision. Not, I'm going to the gym today. I'm going to the gym today. No, I'm going to go. When I get in the car, I'm going to the gym. When I show up at this Christmas party, there will be a decision to be made, and I'm making this decision now. It's not going to be that hard when I get there. I'm making the decision now.
Yeah, and that fork in the road, you mix a 6-pack in, is a lot more difficult to see. It's plain as day when you're sober.
Yeah.
And for anybody in recovery, they know that just that the choices you make and the decisions ahead get very blurry, and maybe even worse, crystal clear which way you should go, and that's the wrong way.
It is worse. And I hadn't thought about it like that either. You're like, oh yeah, well obviously we're going the wrong way now. Duh.
Well, and we've mentioned that this story's in the book, but it wasn't originally designed in the book. So you knew I was starting to label out the chapters and stuff in that transition period. And I was working with Keon on it, and we had the chapters laid out. And then I had that service at church. So I can't even take credit for, hey, this is going to be the opener of the book. It was in church during worship music. God's like, hey, you know that story you're running from that you don't want anybody to know? You're starting the book with it. I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, what are you talking about? But like those moments don't happen to me that often. So I knew there was no choice to make. And so even my next time with Keon, I was like, hey, I got something to share with you. And then I told him the testimony. And what's funny about this is what I really want people to hear. I was so nervous to tell him about my brokenness. And then when I told him, he said something along the lines of, Kev, I've always had you right here. You're right here now in my life.
Yeah.
And Stewart, I'm telling you, I've had double-digit people say the exact same thing after you share that testimony. Like, I've always thought highly of you. You're now here.
Yeah.
And so there's something about connecting with people, that Craig Rochelle quote, through your weaknesses, through your brokenness, the humility of it, that people could just see you for what you are, and you take that mask off, and it's liberating. And man, it was so scary for me to share that the first few times. When I have a log. Here's my version of the clean garage. I have a spreadsheet of every day, the day I said I would start that book, and every day until it finished. And I have a notes column, and day 2 of writing that book finished the intro, and I was crying like a baby, man.
Yeah.
It just brought me back in detail to that broken place. And it was painful because like I still, other than our peer group at Telluride, I hadn't shared really with anybody. And that was the first, like, hey, I'm going to tell a group of people that's not NA some pretty big things here. You know, I think it's harder when the people are closer to you for whatever crazy reason until you start doing it.
Right.
And then you start doing it and you let go of it. And then you see the, oh, you're not chastised and kicked out of clubs and fired from companies. You're actually embraced to even a further level, which is a lie of the enemy, right? That wants you to stay down and think you should be shamed and you're alone in this. That's incorrect. And so, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's incorrect, and it's like incongruent with, you know, the heroes of the Bible too. It was just like those people they didn't have it all together. They were stutterers and cast-asides and people who were afraid and dudes that were bankrupt and abused, like over and over and over and over and over again. The power comes from the weakness, not from the perceived or fake or feigned strength. It's there in the lowly of lows that people see your strength. And that is consistent with like the heroes of the Bible and the biblical narrative, that when you tell the story, people say, I've always thought highly of you. And now I think, do your hand higher in there like this, right? Just because that's the truth about where your strength comes from, right?
It's absolutely, that's where my current son of the solar system comes from. Building an army of mountain movers, one person at a time. And you know this, like obviously with the podcast, prior to the podcast, the book, the glazing company, it's not just a fun expression. It's
Right.
my purpose for a reason. I want people to move the mountains in their lives and see them for what they are and know that they're seasons. And what I'm learning is not only do you get through those mountains, but over time become thankful for them.
Yeah.
Like I'm thankful that happened. I'm not looking to run it back. I don't want to go, all right, let's do that again. But I'm thankful for them. And now I'm better prepared for the next set of mountains that I don't even know. They're coming, right? But yeah. I know I need to talk through them. I know I need to have predecisions of mindset. I know I need to have my tribes. I know I need to stay true to my purpose. I know I need to keep my routines and goals. I am better equipped through God and through my people to take on whatever challenges come ahead that I don't see yet.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great lesson through all of it, right? Through your testimony, through, stuff that you talked in the book, through listening to like all of the stuff there's lessons in there to hold fast to and realize and remember that whatever you're hiding from, whatever you're running from, whatever you're struggling with is once you realize it is what it is, once you realize that it is derivative generally of not having, your purpose solar system aligned, once you realize that the strength lies in the weakness, once you start talking with people about it, once you start sharing it, dude, you're free from it. You're free from it.
Yes.
And you can move on. And there is, like we said earlier, there's great strength in that, no doubt.
And that's, if you're going to take anything away from listening, and if you've made it this far, whatever that mountain is that's holding you down, confess it to somebody. And I don't mean confession as like, I'm looking for an apology. Just get it out, get it off your shoulders to somebody, whether it's somebody you trust, whether it's a third party professional. You gotta choose wisely, have discernment on who you're going to share it with, but get it out of your head.
Yeah. Well, there's no real great, like, how do you end that, right? How do you, but other than just run the war drums, right?